There is a version of Drake that fans pay to see, the smooth, smiling, soft-spoken superstar who waves at courtside cameras and posts captions about loyalty. And then there is the other Drake, the one buried inside his own bars, the one most listeners walk past every single time he opens his mouth. Because if you slow these songs down, if you stop dancing long enough to actually read what he is saying, something terrifying starts to surface. He is not hinting. He is not flirting with controversy. He is laying out a confession in slow motion and laughing while the world claps along to it. And the most disturbing part is not the lyrics. The most disturbing part is that millions of people have already heard them and still have no idea what they actually heard. For years, people thought the Drake and Kendrick war was about ego, about rap supremacy, about who could outsell who in a streaming window. They were wrong. This was never a battle about charts. It was a courtroom disguised as a rap beef, and Drake has been delivering testimony against himself in plain English while the audience treated every word like entertainment. Bar after bar, image after image, number after number, he keeps describing a real act, a real disappearance, a real loss, and the culture keeps filing it under petty industry drama. That is the trick. That is the genius and the horror of it. He hides the worst things he has ever said inside the lines people sing the loudest. So tonight we are going to do something most channels will not do. We're going to walk through these lyrics the way a detective walks through a crime scene, slowly, carefully, with a flashlight pointed exactly where the dust settled. We're going to look at the bars that sound like flexes and ask what they really are. We're going to look at the lines that sound like therapy and ask whose body is buried inside them. And by the end, you will not hear Drake the same way again. You will not be able to. Because once you see the pattern, it cannot be unseen. Before we get to the worst of it, you have to understand something about the man at the center. Drake did not just have a problem with Kendrick. Drake had a problem with Kobe Bryant long before Compton ever entered the chat. People forget this. They forget that the Gold Slide tribute, the courtside love, the public mourning, all of it came after years of quiet friction. The crack started on Rick Ross's Stay Scheming when Drake stepped into a verse and decided Kobe's divorce was open territory. He poked at the money. He poked at the prenup that never existed. He poked at Vanessa Bryant in a way that turned strangers in Los Angeles into a chorus of mocking voices, shouting his lyrics at her in parking lots. She fired back online, sharp and unbothered, reminding him that she did not need a gym membership because she was raising a family. And she made one thing brutally clear. Kobe was not his friend. Kobe never was. Drake apologized later. He called the line immature. He played humble. But anybody who watched the 2016 NBA All-Star Game saw the truth in slow motion. Drake walking down a line of legends, handshakes and hugs flying in every direction, and Kobe Bryant standing there like a closed door. No smile. No greeting. Nothing. That single moment told a story that Drake's apology could not erase. A king had drawn a line. A god had refused the offering. And in Drake's world, where everything is collected, archived, and avenged eventually, that kind of rejection does not vanish. It hardens into something else. Something patient. Something dangerous. Now keep that in mind, because everything we are about to unpack lives inside that same emotional logic. The need to win. The need to settle scores. The need to remind everybody, even the dead, that he is still the one keeping count. That is the engine. That is the obsession. And once you see it, every other lyric starts to look less like art and more like a paper trail. The theory we are about to walk through is not some random internet whisper. It is built from Drake's own words, stacked next to his own dates, his own album covers, his own addresses, his own collaborators. It is the idea that Drake encoded the fate of Baby Keem's mother into his music, that he is taunting Kendrick and Kendrick's cousin with details only the guilty would know, that he is showing them where he left her, what he did to her, and what he turned her into. And the most chilling element is the calmness. He raps about this the way a chef talks about plating. No tremor, no hesitation, just rhythm and design. To see it, you have to begin with one word: brothers. On the surface, when Drake mutters about coping, please, and people whispering we brothers, it lands like exhaustion. The famous burnout. The lonely superstar surrounded by leeches. That is the version your cousin hears. That is the version the algorithm rewards. But strip the surface off, and that line is a sneer. It is aimed at Kendrick and Keem, at the bond they built after a tragedy, at the song they made together called Range Brothers. And Range Brothers is not just a song. It is a memorial pointing back at a black Range Rover that lit up the Las Vegas Strip in 2013 in a fireball that killed 3 people. The smoke is still on those lyrics, if you know how to smell it. Drake is not just dismissing their friendship. He is mocking the grief that built it. He is laughing at 2 men whose closeness was forged in mourning, telling them their entire brotherhood is a coping mechanism stitched together by a body count. That is the kind of cruelty that does not come from a stranger. That is the kind of cruelty that comes from somebody who believes he was personally responsible for the loss. And he is not whispering it. He is rapping it on a track and waiting to see who is listening hard enough to flinch. Then comes the line that snapped a lot of theorists to attention. Score back to 10. Most ears bend that line into sports. Comeback talk. Underdog energy. A champion reminding people the trophy room is still his. Listen again. The number 10 in this code is not a basketball reference. It is a tally, a casualty marker, a point added the moment a life is taken. Drake is not bragging about chart positions. He is bragging about a ledger only he keeps. And his refusal of reconciliation right after that line is the punctuation. He does not want a hug. He does not want to please. He already won in his head the moment he believes he extracted the cost. The door is closed because the math is finished. That is the part that should chill you. Not the violence in the metaphor, but the bureaucracy in his voice. The casual way he treats a human life, like a column in a spreadsheet. The casualness is the confession. People with nothing to hide do not write in code. People with nothing to hide do not turn body counts into hooks. And yet here he is, gliding across the beat, scoring the game in front of everyone. Think about how rare that kind of composure is. Most people cannot lie to a coworker without their voice cracking. Most people cannot hide a small secret in a group chat without leaving a trail. And yet here is a man rapping about disposal and dismemberment with the same energy he uses to order a drink at a restaurant. That is not bravery. That is something colder than bravery. That is the sound of a person who has rehearsed the answer so many times in his own head that the line between truth and performance has fused. He cannot tell where one ends and the other begins anymore. Neither can the audience. That is the trap. That is the whole architecture. Look up. Turbulent flights. Cumulus clouds. Squares drawing a line. 3 lines. 3 layers. 3 pieces of a story most listeners hear as poetic chaos. The flight is the flight. Literal. An aircraft moving over an ocean. Dodging is evasion. The deliberate art of staying off the radar of anything that might be watching. And cumulus clouds is not random weather. Cumulus clouds are stamped across the cover of Nothing Was the Same, one of Drake's most iconic albums. So, in the middle of a bar about aerial movement, he plants the visual signature of his own brand on it, as if to autograph the act. Then the squares come in, the investigators, the journalists, the detectives, the people in the back of the room with notebooks trying to draw a line from a fireball in Vegas to whatever happened in the sea afterward. He even tells you what comes next. He says it himself. Turbulence. 1 operation. 2 phases. The desert and the ocean. The blast and the drop. And every word of it tucked inside what most listeners labeled as filler. Read it again with the right lens and it stops being filler. It becomes a flight log. The artistry of it is almost insulting. Because Drake is not a sloppy writer. He is one of the most calculated lyricists of his generation. Every adjective is chosen. Every consonant is placed. He does not stumble into imagery by accident. So when the imagery keeps drifting toward the same scene, the same body of water, the same album cover, the same coordinates, you have to start asking what the odds are. You have to start asking how many flights, how many clouds, how many turbulences a man can squeeze into one verse before the pattern becomes a fingerprint. And once you do that math, you stop hearing a song. You start hearing a witness statement. This is where the investigative ear separates from the fan ear. A fan rewinds for the punchline. An investigator rewinds for the sequence. A fan asks what bar hit hardest. An investigator asks what bar hit twice. Because the lines Drake repeats the most are the lines he wants buried the deepest. The repetition is the camouflage. He says it in a different way each time, hoping you will think the second mention is just style. It is not style. It is reinforcement. It is the same nail being hammered into the same coffin from a different angle. Then we get to the jacket. He says, "You put that jacket on anybody, you are funeral bound." Most listeners interpret a jacket as reputation, as drama, as some kind of label being slapped on a person. In this reading, the jacket is the story itself. The truth of what happened. The weight of knowing. Drake is daring Kendrick and Keem to wear the truth in public. Drape it across their shoulders. Make it the center of their music. And if they do, he warns, it leads to one place. A funeral. Hers. The one that already happened. The one they are still carrying in silence. He is not just denying the act. He is telling them that exposing him will not bring her back. It will only remind everyone that she is gone. And in his mind, that grief is theirs forever, not his. That is not the boast of a rapper trying to win a battle. That is the move of someone who believes he has already broken the people on the other end of the war. And he is right about one thing. They never recovered. They built their entire mission on top of that wound. Every song, every shot, every reference to a brother lost. He sees that mission as proof that his blow landed. And he turns that proof into a punchline. That is psychological warfare at a level most rappers cannot even spell. He is not just attacking their music. He is attacking the very meaning behind the music. He is telling them that the grief they channeled into art, the pain they sculpted into chart-topping records, the loss they wore like armor on stages around the world, was just another input into his machine. He fed off of it. He profited from it. He used it as scaffolding for his own legend. And the fact that he can say all of this with a melody under it is the part that will not let your skin settle. Because melodies are supposed to soothe. His melodies are designed to taunt. But like a goalpost, I am out here just moving around. They say conclusions were drawn, but I am in stupid denial. What is a loss? I will be damned if I am losing it now. People hear that as a man dodging accountability. Hear it again. A goalpost in the language of the modern internet has a second meaning. On social media platforms, when someone shares a post from a private or restricted account, you get a placeholder, an empty box, a message that says attachment unavailable. People in those circles call it a goalpost. The shape is there. The content is gone. You can feel the outline of what was, but the picture itself is missing. Now layer the chemistry on top. AU is the periodic symbol for gold. Gold is plaques. Plaques are trophies. Trophies are bodies turned into prizes. And the theory points to something almost too dark to type. That Drake may have embedded biological material, a piece of baby Keem's mother, inside the plaques that line his own walls. That his trophies might not just be metaphors of victory. They might be evidence. The attachment unavailable. The body unreachable. The plaque full of her. 3 meanings stacked on one image. And the line lands like a flex because that is the camouflage. I am in stupid denial is not regret. It is theater. It is the performance of innocence with the receipts hidden in the next bar. What is a loss? I will be damned if I am losing it now. Because in Drake's mind, the loss already belongs to somebody else. The loss is on Kendrick. The loss is on Keem. The gold is on his wall. The score is closed. Then he points to the throne. The golden goose. Shaking things up at Lucian's house. Lucian Grange runs Universal Music Group, the corporate ceiling above almost everyone we are talking about. Drake, Kendrick, Keem, the whole machine. When Drake calls himself the golden goose stirring the pot inside Lucian's mansion, he is saying something more savage than industry trivia. He is saying that the very tragedy that fuels this war is also the engine printing money for everyone in the building. Her death has charted. Her death has streamed. Her death has paid bills. And he is reminding the entire industry that the gold underneath all of these records, on every label involved, has a name nobody is willing to say aloud. He is the one who shook it loose. He is the one who keeps it spinning. And the men at the top, the suits, the executives, the gatekeepers, they keep cashing checks while pretending not to know. If you have ever wondered why this beef went so deep, why it could not be settled with a handshake at the BET Awards, Why it bled into court filings and police statements and child welfare allegations. It is because of moments like this. The financial machine and the personal grief are tangled into the same knot. You cannot pull at one without dragging the other into the light. And Drake is the one tightening the rope on purpose. Boots on the ground. The phrase that lives in every podcast, every motivational reel, every grind mode caption. Hard work, hustle, dedication. Now read it again through this lens. The boots are not a metaphor. The boots are about feet. The ground is not a battlefield. The battlefield is a human body. The theory walks straight into the cold, surgical territory of dismemberment. Cuts, procedures, hands, legs. Drake describes it as something he did for yourselves, twisting the violence into a gift to the very people it was used against, because in his framing, that violence became the raw material for the entire era of music that followed. Her suffering became the product. Her body became the supply chain. And he wants the two men on the other end of the war to know that he knows exactly how every record they made got built. He even hands them a punchline about it. He talks about handing a body. He jokes about being a masseuse. He turns the most grotesque image into a line that radio can play and clubs can pump. That is the signature of this entire operation. The horror is always wrapped in something the algorithm cannot flag. The blood is always painted as glitter. And then it gets even more direct. If Drake took out the AK, people immediately mapped that bar onto Dr. Dre and the PDF allegations swirling around Drake's circle. That is one possible layer. But in the deeper reading, after all the talk about bodies, flights, and ocean disposals, the doctor reference points somewhere else. To a surgeon. To the medical hands that performed whatever was done to her. Drake is telling on himself by saying it out loud. He is admitting that if he ever named the doctor by initials, the room would empty. The cuffs would follow. The story would change overnight. He is daring himself to say it. And the fact that he flirts with the bar is the whole point. He wants you to feel the edge of the truth without being able to prove it. They say they just smelled. He smirks his way through it. He says there is a special place in hell for people who joke about evil while doing it themselves. And then he keeps rapping. That is the part that breaks the brain. He just confessed to the very thing he just condemned. Baby Keem's track house has a hook built on the line, I smell something. The smell is not metaphorical. The smell is what the ocean returns. The smell is what a body becomes after time. And Drake hears that song the way no other listener hears it because he is the one in the room with the answer. He performs moral outrage while admitting to the act underneath the outrage. The mask slips and slides back on inside the same 8 bars. Now we get to the address. The compound. The throne room. 21 Park Lane Circle. Drake's house in Toronto. The number 21 is not random. February 21st, 2013, the night the Black Range Rover lit up the Las Vegas Strip. The night 3 people died inside a fireball that the news ran in loops for 48 hours and then forgot. 21 as a date. 21 as an address. 21 as a rapper name that suddenly began appearing in Drake's orbit, packaged and styled and pushed under a persona that several theorists believe was constructed from the inside out. The number stops feeling like a coincidence. It starts feeling like a tag spray-painted on every door in the building. Kendrick clocked it. When he raps that he will park his son, he is not just threatening anybody's child. He is using the same coordinate system, the same numerology. He is telling Drake that he sees the codes too. He sees the planted artists. He sees the address. He sees the entire shadow architecture that propped Drake up while pretending to be organic. And in that one bar, Kendrick collapses years of industry theater into a sentence that hits multiple targets at once. 21 Savage. Lil Yachty. Every plant. Every clone. Every shell artist writing behind the curtain. Drake is aware they noticed. That is why he raps that you forgot what he is from. That is why he insists you forgot what he has done. He is reminding the entire war that the foundation underneath him is older and uglier than any of them want to admit. And he is daring them to keep pulling on the thread. You forgot if I gave you a hand, you wanted a thumb. To most ears, this lands as a cliché about ungrateful people. The kind of line your uncle says at Thanksgiving. But in the framework we are building, the thumb is not a metaphor. It is a digit. It is a piece. The theory pulls this line into the same surgical territory as the boots. A hand offered, a thumb taken, limbs separated, documentation sent. The metaphor stops being a metaphor and becomes a description of an act designed to communicate something terrifying to a specific family. A warning, a signal, a piece of evidence wrapped inside a flex. If your gut just turned, that is the appropriate response. If you feel resistance, that is also fair. Because the line between paranoid pattern recognition and accurate decoding is razor-thin in cases like this. But the responsibility of an honest investigator is to hear the bar, hold it next to every other bar in the same song, and ask whether the pattern is consistent. And so far in this verse, the pattern is unbroken. Bodies, flights, plaques, brothers, surgeons, addresses, hands, thumbs, smells, smoke. Every image keeps marching in the same direction. And that is the part that keeps even the skeptics up at night. Because if it were one line, it could be coincidence. If it were two lines, it could be poetic obsession. But it is dozens. It is an entire ecosystem of imagery, all pointing to the same shoreline, all built around the same vanished woman, all delivered by the same man who once stood in a stadium and refused to even acknowledge that any of this exists. The denial is loud. The denial is consistent. The denial is also part of the design. You build a fortress of plausible deniability so thick that no single brick can be removed without the rest of the wall standing. And only when somebody steps back to see the entire structure does the shape of what was built become visible. That is what Kendrick did. He made the world step back. He made the world stop staring at one brick and start staring at the wall. Convenient amnesia from all you ballerinas. This is Drake throwing Kendrick's earlier Parkinson's reference back into the air. Amnesia is not random brain damage. Amnesia is targeted, selective, convenient. Drake is suggesting that Kendrick either forgot or chose to forget what was actually done to a woman in a process. While Drake remembers every step because he is the one who allegedly arranged it, he tells Kendrick that no bar in any rap battle can change what was said back then. The poetic justice writing sessions, the ghost work, the leverage, the retaliation, the receipts, none of it can be unwritten. The price, in his telling, has already been collected, paid in something that no apology can repurchase. And then he turns to the arena. He says he should not even be shocked to see Kendrick there because Kendrick has always switched teams. On the surface, that is a LeBron joke. On the surface, it is sports talk. But peel the layer, and it is a story about a ghostwriting relationship that allegedly broke down. About a young Compton artist who refused to sit in Drake's shadow, who walked away from the private arrangement, who chose Compton over the corporation. And the deeper layer reaches all the way back to Kobe. To switching teams as a coded reference to legacy, loyalty, and the dead. More bodies in the street. More references to people who said no to him. More fuel for the bonfire he is hiding inside every metaphor. When Drake talks about hearing about Kobe in a city that took him in, the words sound nostalgic, almost sweet. But sit with it. The first place that ever opened its doors to him outside of Toronto was Los Angeles. The same city that became Kobe's kingdom. The same city where Vanessa fired her warning shot. The same city Drake stood inside while paying tribute to a man who had publicly refused his hug. There is a long memory here. A grudge stitched into gratitude. A wound dressed up as a love letter. And it is exactly the emotional climate where the worst kind of operator thrives. Smiling on stage. Counting in silence. He even rapped, years ago, about Kobe's hunger, about Black Mamba energy, about seeing the future first, purple and gold, his one-man LA king. The same Drake who quietly nursed an old line about Kobe's divorce was suddenly anointing him a god in verse. The pivot is too clean. The pivot is too rehearsed. Most fans heard it as evolution. Investigators hear it as misdirection. Because the moment you start showering somebody publicly with worship is often the same moment you are privately reframing them in your mind from rival to ghost. From obstacle to memory. And then the helicopter. The desert. Pedal bars. A child on a bike. the humble video, the issues video, a searchlight scanning sand, a camera angle that crosses cinema and surveillance. Riding a bike, the theory says, is pedaling. Pedaling is moving water. Moving water is ocean. Ocean is where the disposal is alleged to end. And in the air above that pedal bar, a helicopter circles. A searchlight cuts the dust. People are looking for someone. People are always looking for someone. And one of those someones, in the symbolic vocabulary stitched through these videos, is Kobe Bryant himself. 24. The number tied to his jersey. 24. The number that turned into a year. 2024. The year not like us dropped. The same cover where 13 pins decorate Drake's house. 13. 2013. The Vegas fireball. 13. Gianna Bryant's age the day the helicopter went down. When the numbers begin to braid together like that, they do not feel like coincidence anymore. They feel like architecture. They feel like a man obsessed with a private calendar he refuses to share with the rest of us, while leaving its calendar pages scattered across his lyrics like breadcrumbs only the people closest to him are meant to find. And he counts on the rest of us, mistaking those breadcrumbs for poetry. Comb through this hair before you cut me for recruit. Hear it slow. Kobe was bald when he died. Combing a bald head is not combing. It is dragging a blade along bare skin. It is the ritual of a barber, yes, but also the choreography of something darker, applied to a man who no longer needed grooming. The metaphor edges right up against the image of a body. The cut becomes literal. The recruit becomes the next person being prepared, or claimed, or replaced. Another death dressed in the costume of style. Another death disguised as a flex. Another bar that whispers to the right ears while singing to the wrong ones. Then comes the loop back to Vegas. The fire. The coupe. The car that opened fire at a stoplight. The explosion that lit up the night. The 3 lives that ended in a smear of metal and glass on the boulevard. Drake brags about flying that coupe. He brags that he has not been in a cage since. Not in jail. Not in custody. Not charged. Not held. A decade gone, and no consequence. And he understands, deeply, that anyone who reads these bars correctly will be treated like a conspiracy theorist. He needs that. He depends on it. His entire system of confession works only because the public has been trained to mock the people who decode it. He even tells you that integrity is lost when the metaphor does not reach you. Read that sentence again. He is saying his lyrics carry weight only with the people sharp enough to catch them. Everyone else is collateral. Everyone else is camouflage. Everyone else is the noise that keeps the signal safe. And the gap between what he actually means and what most fans are willing to believe he means is the cathedral he built his career inside. I was on a coupe with my mama. He says it plainly. He repeats it. He lets the number, the model, the make blur into the line like it is just a flex. But every time the word coupe appears in this war, on his side or Kendrick's, it sits next to a mention of mama. And in this code, mama is not always his own mother. It is hers. The woman the theory believes was placed inside that coupe. The woman who was driven out of one city and never arrived in the next. The mama on the corner. The mama on the bike. The mama on the radio. The mama whose ghost is laced through every verse from both sides of this war. Once you see her in the lyrics, you start to see her everywhere. And you cannot scrub her out of the songs anymore. This is the part where most people pause and ask the obvious question. Why would anyone do this in public? Why would a rich, famous, untouchable man lay this much bait on the record? The answer is the same answer you get from every powerful figure who has gotten too comfortable, too high up. Hubris. He believes he is too big to be heard correctly. He believes the camouflage of music is permanent. He believes that as long as the hooks are catchy and the visuals are clean, the public will keep dancing on top of the grave. And for a long time, he has been right. The numbers kept climbing. The shows kept selling. The world kept playing along. Until somebody, a small, quiet, dangerous somebody from Compton, decided to start translating in front of everyone. That is what Kendrick really did. He did not just win a rap battle. He cracked the cipher. He pointed at the bars. He named the address. He drew arrows toward the Range Rover. He turned a private joke into a public spectacle. And the entire world, for the first time, started looking at Drake's catalog the way you look at a serial killer's notebook. Not for art, for evidence. And once the world starts looking that way, it cannot stop. That is why every old song now sounds different. That is why Gold Slide hits like a haunting. That is why Range Brothers feels like a memorial. That is why even the most innocent tribute, the most polished interview clip, the most heartwarming red carpet hug, suddenly carries a second meaning. Because the audience finally learned the language. And the language was never about love. The language was about ownership, about scoring, about making sure that the people who tried to leave him, the people who tried to outshine him, the people who tried to refuse him, would never fully escape the gravity of his story. This is what makes the whole saga so unsettling. It is not just the lyrics. It is the realization that the soundtrack of a generation might have been narrating a real loss the entire time, in slow motion, in plain sight, while we sang along. The hook was always the trick. The hook was always the lullaby that put the truth to sleep. And once you wake up from it, you cannot fall back asleep, no matter how clean the production is, no matter how warm the melody. And that is where the real reckoning lives. Not in courtrooms, not in headlines, not in the streets, but in the listener. In every person who has to decide what to do with a song they used to love that now feels like a confession. In every fan who has to choose between comfort and clarity. In every playlist that suddenly carries a tombstone you did not know was there. Because the music industry will not stop printing money on top of this. Universal will not stop. Streaming platforms will not stop. The radio will not stop. The only thing that can really break the spell is your own ear, sharpened, awake, refusing to be sung to sleep. So the next time a Drake track slides into your feed, listen the way a journalist listens. Listen the way a detective listens. Listen for the smoke. Listen for the number. Listen for the address. Listen for the brother that is not really a brother. Listen for the boots that are not really boots. Listen for the coupe that keeps showing up next to the word mama. Listen for the laugh after the most disturbing line. That laugh is the autograph. That laugh is the proof. Because guilty men do not always whisper. Sometimes they sing. And maybe that is the most haunting truth in this entire story. That the loudest confessions in modern music might be the ones we keep streaming the most. That the artists we crown might be telling us exactly who they are every single night, on every speaker, in every car, in every gym, in every living room, and the only thing keeping the truth invisible is our refusal to translate. Drake does not need a courtroom. He has already taken the stand. Bar by bar, song by song, album by album. The witnesses are out there. The transcript is the discography. And the verdict, in the end, will not be delivered by a judge. It will be delivered by you the next time the song plays and you decide, finally, to actually listen. Because once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. And once you see the pattern, you cannot pretend. The plaques on the wall, the clouds on the cover, the numbers on the door, the smile on the camera. They were never decoration. They were a map. And the map has been pointing at the same place this whole time. The only question left is how long the world will keep pretending it does not know where the X is buried. Maybe that is the legacy of this entire era. Not the streams, not the awards, not the bragging rights, but a long, uncomfortable mirror held up to a culture that taught itself to dance through warnings and clap through confessions. A culture that mistook charisma for character and aesthetics for accountability. A culture that handed a microphone to a man who used it like a notebook and never asked what he was writing down. The receipts were always in the music. The smoke was always in the studio. The shadows were always at the edge of the frame. And the moment the lights finally swing all the way around to where he is standing, do not be surprised by what they catch. Because the song never lied.